I was put in charge of mobilizing for Extinction Rebellion when it was very small, and there was 15 people that set up Extinction Rebellion, and as is the way with these things, about 8 of the people just happened to be in the room at the time. You know, they were just like hangers on. So it was really like 8 people. And anyway, they put me in charge of mobilization because, you know, I've done some research on it. So I was in charge of mobilizing the whole country. So I got a friend of mine, Robin, to help me. And I said, right, we're going to mobilize the whole country to have a rebellion against the British government. So as you can imagine, it didn't sound that credible. Anyway, so the deal was that he was going to take the east part of the country. No, he was going to take the west part of the country, and I was going to take the east part of the country. So that like cut it down to me on, you know, 25 million people. Anyway, so I rang my mate up in Nottingham, which is quite a radical city. And I said, hey, we're going to have a rebellion against the British government over the climate. And I was a bit sheepish about it. And he said, fantastic news, you know, this is what we need. So I was, oh, great. You know, it's on the go. Do you know that feeling? Like, oh, you think it's on the go. Anyway, he said, yeah, he's going to get all his friends to come. So I turned up and I was feeling really enthusiastic. Anyway, on my first promotion of Extinction Rebellion, there was him and his best friend, and that was it. There was just two people. So as you can imagine, you know, I think Donald's probably familiar with this phenomenon, aren't you? So you put loads of effort into a meeting and 2 people turn up. Anyway, I thought, you know, I'm made of stronger stuff than most people. So I gave my little banging speech. And then his friend of his was going, oh my God, you know, it's so bad. It's so bad. You know, it's a lot worse than I thought. And you know, I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And he said, right, I'm going to get all my friends to come. Anyway, so I said, yeah, I'll come back in 3 weeks. So I came back in 3 weeks and 20 people were there. And that's my sort of whenever people complain that nothing's happening in their country, I always use that story because, of course, like half a year later, it was like 1,000 people in Nottingham signed up and 200,000 people had signed up within like 9 months of that meeting. So next time you have a meeting and 2 people turn up, just remember that's how Extinction Rebellion started. So just carry on. So that's one thing. And in case you think this is a bit of a one-off story, like after COVID, or just as we were coming out of COVID, as you know, I helped to found Insulate Britain in the UK. And that started off with 3 of us in a room with my mad hat idea of sitting in motorways. So you can blame me for this if you like. Next time you're asked to sit in a motorway. Anyway, so I said, you know, this is what we've got to do. Anyway, there was only 3 of us. So myself and Larch, who's this guy, I've known him for 30 years. We've worked together for decades. Anyway, he said, right, we know we're going to go around the country. So we went around the country doing these talks. So about 3 months later, we had 17 people and it was like 1 a week. It was a bit miserable. So then we said, right, we're going to go out and we're going to do 5 talks a week. So for about 3 months, I did 5 talks a week. I just went around the whole country. And it was literally like 1 person per meeting. So it was a bit like getting blood out of a stone. So I know some of you know what that feels like. So when we actually got to August, we actually had 100 people, but it took that long. It took like about 9 months to get it organized. So the upshot of it is, you know, the first thing I want to say to you all is if you, there's nothing unusual about it taking loads of effort to get something like this on the go. And in the literature, it's sort of called jumping the chasm, which is a nice way of saying you get nowhere for ages until things take off. So the second thing I just want to talk about is a lot of people around the world, you know, say, oh, the UK is great, you know, you've got thousands of people on the go, you know, what's your strategy? How do you deal with the press? You know, what's your action tactics? And they think that the whole thing is based on some sort of you know, genius strategy sort of situation. And I always have to say to them that the key reason we've been successful, in my humble opinion anyway, is because we have a culture of service. And this is probably the biggest difference between us and many groups around the world. And it's one of these things which is difficult to put your finger on. So, you know, it's like one of these nice words, isn't it? Everyone's being in service. But I am going to try and define it for you and try and concretize it. Otherwise, I'm just going to be waffling on. So I'm not saying this is the final word on the concept of service, okay? But for me, it means like realizing that something has to be done. Something has to be done. In other words, like we don't really have any choice. You know, this is it, and we have to get on with the job. And once you realize that something has to be done, then you just become a lot less ego about it, if you see what I mean. It's like there's no choice but to get on with it. And once you've made that sort of quite profound decision, I think the next thing you realize, and I think many of you must know this, is the real question for people then is, you know, what can I give? This is a desperate situation. You have to do what it takes. I have to do something. And then you're going, okay, so what can I give to the project? What gifts do I have? What time, money, you know, whatever it is. And in other words, like what we say to people, and I sometimes say in the talk, is it's no longer about us. You know, like I'm sure many people in this call have been in activism for a long time, and I have. And there's this traditional idea of activism that there's you, and then you do a little bit of activism. You see what I mean? And if it doesn't turn out all right, you stop doing it and you do something else. And really what we're facing in 2022 is a reverse situation, which is the situation is determining what you do. It's not about you. You know, if you're going to have any self-respect, you basically are going to have to do what has to be done. And the miraculous thing about that is it just makes everyone work better together. And that's really how we're going to save the world, is by working better together. And I know, you know, we could talk about it for hours, and I'm not claiming, you know, the last thing I'm claiming to know about the depths of human nature or human psychology. But what I will say is that when everyone's clear and focused on what this is about, which is not about ourselves, then you get this great team spirit. And I think reading between the lines, some of you felt that when you went out in the road last time. And there's nothing like, you know, that feeling of solidarity and love between people when you're going out to face, you know, face the situation. And, you know, I'm not idolizing it for a minute, right? It's scary stuff. And at the same time, it binds us together. And if you want to know the secret of transformative political change, you know, in my book, it's basically the rolling out of that spirit of solidarity and determination. And when that gets to scale, historically, it's unstoppable. So you're just having a little taste, really, of this enormous power that we all have when we all act together in that sort of collective determination, I suppose. And that's really connected with, you know, I know this is a cliche, but, you know, I think when Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement were saying, focus on the prize, I think that's what they were talking about. So I think you're familiar with that phrase. And everyone goes, oh yeah, obviously we're focusing on the prize, but we don't, do we? Right? You know, someone annoys you, and, you know, it's so easy to fall out over little things, and they're not little things, they're really important things, but there's something that's more important than even the important things, which is to keep your eye on the prize. And the prize is not like to get, but, you know, President Biden to declare emergency. The prize is to be in dedication together to that aim. You see what I mean? If the primary objective for you guys is to stick together and support each other, and then everything else is going to move along. You know, no guarantees, but unless you can stick together, forgive each other when you go slightly, you know, off tangent, then, you know, that's the main thing. As far as I can see, anyway, you know, what do I know? But that's important. Okay, so I'm not going to talk for too long because, you know, I think you guys might have some questions to ask. And really all I want to do in this call is like set the scene on where we might all be going and provide some support to you, because I guess the other thing I think you might be thinking is, oh, we're only 20 people, you know, in a population of 300 million, you know, what can we do? Well, I've got some sort of bad news for you, as it were. And I'm saying that paradoxically. So the bad news is it's entirely possible for you to transform America. And I'm saying it's bad news because there's nothing more comforting than feeling defeated, because it means you don't have to step up. You know, there's that quote from Nelson Mandela, isn't there? You know, the thing we're most frightened of is our own power. You know, if we're not going to get anywhere, that's great, because, you know, you can just moan about it. And I've heard loads of moaning from America, right? So Americans specialize in moaning. And, you know, not trying to be disrespectful, but you're specialists in the moaning front. But, you know, what I'm here to say is, and this is about focusing on the prize, right? We need to focus on our resources, right? Our spiritual strength, our love for each other, you know, our tactics, our strategy, all these things are important. It's not like one's more important than the other. So I'm just going to run through the scary possibility that you are on the cusp of transforming America. So again, you know, don't sue me or something if it doesn't work. It's not, you know, this isn't a car engine situation. It's probability analysis, as they say in the trade. But what I've been trying to do, as a few of you, like Michelle, know, I've been meeting with the US people for about 2 years now, and we've been struggling away. And one thing you should know about me is I never give up. I keep going. And, you know, I've had ample reason to give up on America, dare I say, over the last 2 years. But, you know, we've had COVID. There's been a whole bunch of objective reasons why there's been, you know, problems and what have you. But I think the biggest thing we've got now, apart from you guys, you know, forming into a group, is what's technically called proof of concept, which is a bit of a technical word. But what I mean by that, without beating around the bush, is you went out like 4 or 5 weeks ago now, and 3 million people watched you on TV, right? That's what I needed, right? That's what I need from you guys, is to show me that you can get 3 million people watching you, right? Because there's been this, you know, another sort of American money routine, which is, oh, you block the roads around Washington. You know, Washington's different, America's different, no one's bothered. And I was going like, I don't think so. You know, everyone's human. People like drama. So what you basically proved is, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to Italy or anything, but you're no different to Italy, or Italy's no different to you. So 15 people went out in Italy and blocked the roads around Rome, and they're on national news and, you know, blah, 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 it all took off. So it is possible for very few people to get a massive amount of publicity, and, you know, without beating around the bush, that's what we're in. That's the situation. And Interstate Britain and all the A22 projects, you know, have been broadly based on the Freedom Riders hypothesis, as you might say. And I don't mean that in some exact way, because obviously there's always difficulties with historical comparisons. But as you all know, those 400 people in America in 1962 went to prison, did transform the movement, and that movement went on to change many things in your country. So it's just one of those inconvenient truths. The main inconvenient truth is not that climate is a terrible, you know, it's going to collapse. That's not the inconvenient truth. The inconvenient truth is that a few people can change history, because it means we haven't got any excuse, as you might say. So the next step is to roll the situation out. So, I mean, I'm here if you want to ask me, you know, some technical questions and bits and pieces, that's fine. But I have got a plan which I'm working with a few people, and there's nothing original about this plan because we've been sort of working on it for about 2 years. But in the last 2 years, something very significant has happened, which is more than ever before, lots of rich people are shitting themselves and they want to give us money. In fact, I would say that a lot of rich people are more radical than you guys. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I get telephone calls from them going, what's going on in America? Why aren't they blocking the ports? You know, and all this sort of thing. So there is a lot of money. I mean, because, dare I say it, rich people are human too, and they've got kids and they don't want to see the horrendous stuff that's coming down the line. And the second thing that's different, I suppose, is well, it's just been 40 degrees in Britain, and there's been a step change in consciousness. And I think every time there's these major weather events, and I'm sure, you know, you've seen this in the American West, you know, in California, there's a big step change in people's willingness to entertain the possibility that climate crisis is real. Now, it's like 101 mobilization, that people can be as aware as they like. You know, people can be as fucked off as you want them to be, but they're not going to do anything unless they have a pathway to action. So that's one of the reasons when I look at America, I'm not saying Americans don't want to rise up. It's, you know, the reason why nothing's happening is because there's no pathway to action and there's no inspiring, coherent vision of change. So you need both those things. So I'm working, I'll just blurt this out, okay? But I'm working on a plan to raise $10 million to employ initially 100 people to get 1,000 people into Washington, and then 1,000 people to get 10,000 people into Washington, to do what has happened in Washington, DC, you know, 5 or 6 times over the last 100 years, where a massive amount of people go to the capital city and stay there until they're arrested and such like, and make history. And the reason why that's, you know, why I'm going for the jugular is partially because if you're going to get ordinary people to do something, you've got to give them a plan that looks like it's meaningful, right? If you go to the good citizens of Washington and say, we're going to have a little sit down, you know, on a motorway in April because we don't like the climate, ordinary people aren't going to do it, right? You've got to go to them and say, we're going to transform America. And that's exciting. See, because ordinary people, as you may know, are not cynical, right? Activists are cynical, you know, political, extreme people are cynical, but most ordinary people, they just want to see something that works, you know, and you need to have that vision. The second thing is we've only got 3 years left, and I don't think any of us quite understand the meaning of that. So I'm not going to pretend we fully understand the meaning of it. All I'm going to suggest is we understand it sufficiently to know we have to make massive risks and we have to go for the win that's going to work, because a half win is as bad as a no win. And that's just defined by the physics, right? We're on a cliff edge. Everyone's read the literature, you know, the tipping points, the Arctic, all the rest of it. And we really have to be mature enough to understand if we don't win totally, as it were, we're not going to win at all. In other words, what we have to go out and talk to Americans and British people and say, we have to transform the whole thing, otherwise we're not going to get there. And again, ordinary people can understand that, right? Because you're just being honest with them. A lot of political people are going, well, it's not possible, and, you know, start off gradually, and it's not really going to work, and 101 excuses. But what we have to be is the visionaries, because being visionary is the only realist position. And I've written about this, you know, that realism is now, is the idealism, if you see what I mean. Then in my defense, I actually think organizing civil disputes in Washington is actually pretty straightforward, because the design that you've got and the design we've got is very simple. So the key, this will be my last point, the key challenge for us, apart from everyone getting on with the job, is to keep the system simple, right? Don't get thrown off by all the little sub projects. You know, someone else wants to come and do something, that's cool. Your job is to go out and leaflet and canvas and get 100, 1,000 people to do the same. And it's a really simple ask, which is going to go to Washington, DC, sit outside the White House or whatever it is. People are going to be arrested and we're going to keep going for 5 or 10 weeks or whatever it is. And at some point we'll be in the ballpark of getting President Biden to make a response, right? And obviously it can be all sort of depressive and, you know, defeatist about it and say, well, Roger, it might not work. It's like, if we get to that stage, we'll be fine, okay? Take it from me. We, you know, what the real project here, of course, is to regalvanize the, you know, amazing and glorious tradition of pragmatic American radicalism, right? And I'll finish with a little story. I actually came to your country for about 6 months studying communes in my rather radical youth. And basically, it was the sort of reverse situation. I went to all these intentional communities. I was going, oh my God, they're so organized. They're so pragmatic. They're so successful. Because in Britain, there are all these individualist anarchist types. And if you got 4 of them in the room, they'd all start shouting at each other. And it was just a nightmare. So it was like a reverse sort of situation. And I was so impressed with America. And I came back to Britain. I said, those Americans, they're great. They're so organized. And so, you know, American culture sort of helped inspire a lot of stuff in the UK. If you don't know that, pat yourself on the back. So it's a sort of like, I'm coming back with all the good stuff in that amazing American tradition and saying to you, you know, just reconnect with that, you know, amazing, pragmatic spirit of service that has done so much for our societies. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. I hope that's sort of helpful. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. So did I hear you say you're okay answering a few questions?
Yeah, I'd love to, if that's okay, yeah. Just to say, of course, I mean, I'm just on this call by myself. There are, you know, acres of other people, but I thought I'd like to introduce myself and just say my piece. But just to be clear, you know, I'm not some sort of, you know, guru-esque leader or anything. Don't panic, right? I mean, I'm just here. I'm a British farmer. I didn't see anyone for 20 years, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just here to be in service to get this project on the go. And there's loads of other people, you know, who are going to be in support. So I think you'll meet a lot more of the international gang, as it were, from other projects in 2 weeks. And then I'll hopefully, you know, fade into the background a little bit. Anyway, that's yeah, that's me, just to be clear. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah.
Okay, so if people have questions, could someone, I don't know, somebody who's not doing anything else on this call, could you monitor people's hands as they go up? So that way we can have a organized way to ask questions. How about Allie, could you do that or no? No, you're gonna.
I was just gonna ask Holly to do that. I know Holly's good at doing that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. What do you think, Holly?
I'll give it a whirl. Sure.
All right, so let the first question rip. Who's got their hand up?
Right now, it looks like Jason has his hand up.
Jason from McGeevy.
Hello, Bojo. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just about. Just speak quite slowly, yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering what the dates are. October 1st through when? I didn't see when a possible mobilization would.
We're going to
Can
go
you just say that
October
again?
1st.
Sorry, Paul. Yeah, go on.
I think he asked what the dates are for the next mobilization. And the dates are October 1st for the first 2 weeks of October, starting October 1st.
Yeah, yeah, and I forgot to say, yeah, it's October the 1st when most countries around the Western world are going into action. And in the UK, just to let you know, like things have just significantly taken off. So we had 3,500 people on Britain's biggest Zoom call last week to talk about the national emergency of going over 40 degrees. And Jeremy Corbyn came, who was the ex-leader of the Labour Party, and some famous naturalist people and what have you. And 300 people signed up to engage in civil disobedience. So that's about a fifth of the way there in one meeting. Now, you know, this is what you all need to think about, right? Is yeah, you're going to get, you know, 5-10 people a week. And then some big guys are going to come in and go, fuck, this is great. They're going to, you know, have a public meeting with 1 million Twitter followers. And suddenly you're going to get 500 people sign up. Yeah, that's how it goes. It's like a real grind. And this is what happened with Extinction Rebellion, right? No one was interested in Extinction Rebellion for about 6 months, right? Everyone thought it was a bit dumb. And then, what's he called? George Monbiot. Do people know this guy? He's like Britain's most famous environmental journalist. He did an article about it, and then Bernie Sanders put it on his Facebook page. And after that, it was just like, you know, it's just like, woo! You know, it took off. So that's the name of the game, is you're going to grind away for a while, and you've been doing it for 4 months. At some point in the next 3 months, you know, if I can bring in some of the big names, as it were, then, you know, we just need to be prepared for a few hundred people to sign up in one go. And they're out there, right? You should know that. So that's quite interesting. So we've got 1,300 people signed up now. 500 people in the last 2 weeks.
So it looks like we have another question with Tim.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks for being here. I really wouldn't be here probably if it wasn't for some of your talks, like how to change or how to stop the climate crisis in 6 months, where you talked about keeping the ask simple. And so I was just hoping to ask you about the vision, if we could talk about the vision a little bit more, because so far, as I've been supporting Declare Emergency, I think our simple ask was for the president to declare an emergency, right? So we could get on to the next, all the good work that needs to happen after that. But then when you just talked about having a coherent vision, and we're explaining how it's not about declaring a climate emergency, that just made me want to ask, so what are we thinking is our vision? Because I think you're right, Americans are practical, and right now the biggest source of resistance to change is regarding alternatives, getting off fossil fuels and having an alternative economy that works like we want it to work for everyone, in a way that doesn't bust the Earth's carrying capacity to support the economy. And so is that too much of a vision to say we want to transform America? But like if I have practical friends who are asking, what do you mean, Tim? I want to talk about us going circular economy or going energy, clean energy, and planting trees and eating healthy diet. And all of a sudden, we're talking about all 9 planetary boundaries. So how do we keep it simple and still have a robust vision, simple vision that we can all get behind?
Yeah. So there's 2 or 3 aspects to this. And by the way, nothing I say is like, you know, I'm not handing out some dogma here, right? This is all probabilistic. Does everyone understand what I'm trying to say when I say that, right? just means it's more likely to happen than the next thing down the line, right? So what I was saying in the, you know, Stop Climate Change in 6 months video was I was just making like the key analytical point, which is when a civil resistance project is at an early stage of development, what it needs strategically is a win. So strategically, you don't ask for the stars. We all want to get to the stars, right? It's not like we're sitting here thinking, well, you know, Biden's going to declare emergency and then we're all going to go back to the farm. See what I mean? Like it's a purely strategic move. And the reason why Martin Luther King and Gandhi, you know, particularly as strategists in the early stages of their career, asked for really little aims. Like Gandhi went to India, he just had real crappy aims initially before he became a national figure. And as you know, with the Freedom Riders, you know, it wasn't a significant aim. I think in Birmingham campaign, it was like one black person to be employed by the merchants in the centre of Birmingham, right? The reason why they did that was they knew the massive empowerment effect of a real victory. Even if it's an actual small victory, cognitively, a victory is a victory, if you see what I mean. It's a little bit irrational, but it's like, oh my God, they've won something. And then hundreds of thousands of people who don't want to be on this call because they don't think it works are going to go, actually, it does. So we saw this with Extinction Rebellion in 2019. You know, the victory was rubbish. It was just the government declaring a climate emergency, like what you're doing. But 50,000 people joined Extinction Rebellion within 4 weeks because everyone suddenly went, all those 50,000 people went, oh my God, you know, this could be a thing. So, you know, you could have, if you win this, you know, there's 300 million people, was it 370 million in America? So you could project that if you win this campaign, then you could have 300,000 people wanting to do civil disobedience in America, right? So that's the first thing, right? But there's a more important goal, as I referred to before, which is there's a lot of intellectual, you know, airy-fairy sort of debate on what should happen, which is, to my mind, completely impractical. In other words, you know, we need to do this and we need to do this and we need to do this. And it's a bit like having a roadmap and saying where you want to go before you've fixed the engine in your car, right? And the engine in your car, i.e. that's going to get you to that destination, is the culture of service in the movement that you've got. So the real prize here is the culture of dedication and clarity and pragmatism in a movement. And that's the primary reason, in my humble opinion, that America is not booming ahead, because it's got dysfunctional movement cultures. And, you know, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. And don't give you a hard time, right? London's the same, right? But so that's your real role, or for all 20 of you, is basically to become leaders of a new culture of pragmatic respect and getting on with the work. And if you can transfer that culture, then more people will come who are attracted to it. And then, of course, you can decide where to go. So it's like the wrong way round. So it's a fusion of having a really clear aim and creating this pragmatic culture of service together. And obviously, you know, when we've won, then we can have another chat. But that's good enough to get going, I would suggest, you know. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Roger. I noticed that Max had his hand up, and I know that Jason has his hand up, but I thought, Max, you'd like to ask a question, or no, it was answered for you?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, well, first of all, my name is Max, Mr. Hallam. I recently became the longest serving person in jail on behalf of Declare Emergency at the DC jail, first of us to go there. and
Yeah.
I was wondering what your opinion is of electric cars.
I thought you were going to say something really profound then, Max, about, you know, about your meeting with God or something in prison. But yeah, okay. Like, you know, as I said at the beginning of my little talk to you, I'm not setting myself up as some all-knowing guru-esque person, right? Now, I mean, I can tell you a lot about organic vegetables. I can tell you nothing about electric cars. I mean, I'm not your man, right? What I'm here to do is to help you guys get into a position where you can mobilize effectively, work effectively together, and hopefully have a single aim. Now, having said that, of course, I've got all sorts of opinions about electric cars, but you shouldn't like project onto me, Roger's the guy to ask questions about electric cars, right? You know, go and get some energy expert to talk to you about it. Because I don't know, you know, I don't quite, it's not, the economy is not my specialism. So I'm not really going to answer it, not because I'm trying to avoid the question, but because I don't want you all to start thinking you can ask me about, you know, how to get on with your mum or something. It's that, you know, I've got limited expertise, and electric cars isn't one of them. And I don't have one. I probably won't have one. I'm a public transport man myself, but you know, there we are. Yeah. Hope that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll go to Jason. He was next in line. If you want to ask another question, Jason. Maybe not. He said that in the chat. Okay. So
let's
can
try
you, for some
and
reason, can you hear me? Nod your head.
Can we have a little rule that people only ask one question and then it enables more people to ask something, if that's all right?
Yep.
And it'd be good if those of you that are a bit shy, you ask I usually do this thing where everyone has to think of a question, and then it forces everyone to think of something. Anyway, if you're a bit shy, just ask a question. It's fine. You know, what do I know? Right. Anyway, Juliana. Yeah.
Okay. So then let's go to Jay. I see you have your real hand up.
Sorry.
First, I just want to say it's absolutely fabulous that you're here. Thank you so much for doing this. The volume changed for me about midway through what you've been saying, but I thought I heard you say something about rich people, and then I thought I heard you say that perhaps we could find people to underwrite other people coming to DC. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think, to be honest with you, I think the money is the last of our worries, right? I mean, that's a mad thing to say, isn't it? But I genuinely think that is the case. I mean, again, don't give me a hard time if that turns out to be rubbish, but that's my analysis, okay? I think the whole of our culture is entering a nervous breakdown. And in times of moral and spiritual and political crisis, people step up. Yeah. And you will be surprised, you know, once you get going, how many people are prepared to step up because they intensely love the people they love. It's as simple as that. And people with money are no different to us.
Can I follow up on that just quickly?
Yeah, sure.
I'm calling people all over the country from the Extinction Rebellion list.
Yeah.
And so often I hear, wow, I'd love to go. I don't have the money. Like from the Bay Area, that sort of thing. I can't say to them, oh, don't worry about it. We'll pay for it. You know? Yeah,
exactly. So it's all a little bit, the practical bit, Jay, is about the chicken and egg. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the chicken and egg basically is, number one, are you a coherent group, right? Because I can't run around all these rich people going, hey, there's these people in Washington. And then, you know, 2 weeks later, you've all fallen out with each other, right? To be blunt, right? You've all got to make a decision that you're just going to have to put up with each other and you're getting it on with the job, right? I know you're all a bit suboptimal, you know, who isn't? But it's just the way it is. You're the best people you've got. So you're just going to have to stay with it. It's like a family, right? That's number one. Number two is you have to prove that the concept works, right? Because there's lots of naysayers out there saying, you know, declare emergency, it doesn't work, you know, the concept's wrong. nothing that unusual about Washington, DC. Obviously, it's a big city and it's a big country, right? So obviously, you've got to put on a bit of a bigger show. But, you know, you've got your 3 million views. That's it. I mean, if there was 100 people all blocking motorways, then you would be on national news, you know, give or take. So I've got those. So I was waiting for those two things to happen. And then, as I said, I'm going to some of these key organisers. And then I'm going to go and ask Adam McKay and his friends for money. So I'm saying, practically speaking, I'm saying in the next 3 weeks, we should be beginning at the beginning of a process where we can say to people, in principle, we can get you to Washington. Now that in principle obviously covers a multitude of sins, right? If someone wants like $5,000 to go and buy a jet or something, obviously that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But the plan I've done is something like a budget of $500 for each person. And that's why we need $10 million, is to get people. And obviously, like, it would primarily be East Coast people, because then they don't have to fly, and, you know, Midwest maybe. So, you know, there's question marks about what people do on the West Coast. But we don't need to worry about that, right? As I said, let's keep our eye on the prize. If I can pull all these bits together, and obviously with other people, then the next, you know, the next chicken and egg, as it were, will be, okay, so we need to, you know, say this is going to happen. And then you guys, in combination with the mobilize experts, in combination with Adam McKay, put on calls, and then you get the money, and then you get more people, and then more people makes it more credible, and they'll get more money, right? So it's a bit like a circular, it's a bit like this, right? So you're off the first ring, and you're on to the second ring. There's about 2 or 3 more rings to go. But the first ring's the most difficult ring, believe it or not.
Well, no pressure on you, of course.
Yeah. You know, just another day.
Thank you. That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you, Roger. So then next in the lineup, looking here at the hands, it's Ellie, and then Lucien, Juliana, and then somebody, I don't know who it is, who has a declare emergency banner up. So in that order.
I think we had a question from Jason as well, just if you see it in the chat.
Okay. Is Jason, are you still with us?
He left a message. Anyway, we can do that question when he comes back on. Hopefully he'll get back on. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. What's the next question?
Ellie, please ask your question.
My name is Eli. I was kind of thinking about the electric cars a little bit, and kind of how those can like tie into like extractive industries, like the lithium mines, and like all like these mines where like child labor and stuff is being used that are like extremely destructive to the environment. And I think it's important to take a stance on these destructive industries and the need to rapidly like dismantle them in the coming years in order to prevent environmental crisis. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, quite very possibly. The point I'm trying to communicate, and I'm not trying to not answer your question, although I sort of am, is when you say like take a stand, you presumably mean taking a stand is a moral thing to do, right? It's the right thing to do, to take a stand.
Taking a stance on it, like, does your end goal include like rapidly dismantling these industries in the coming few years, because that is like a need to protect our environment?
Yeah. So it's like, it's a bit of a brain thing where your brain's going in one direction and they ask you to make a sort of like right-hand turn. What I mean by that is like, one of the reasons like politics is so unattractive to people is people get really interested, political people tend to get really interested in having a stand and a position on things. And that's really good, because you do need a stand and position on things, but it's only like half the story, or maybe it's even only a quarter of the story, because there's no point having a stance on something if you can't do anything about it. So my moral position, as it were, is creating a movement that can get you in a position to make a decision on these things is more morally important than making a stance.
I really don't think it's that hard of a decision to make. It's like these industries are just directly destroying the world, and like they are driving the crisis that is going to affect us all. It's not that hard to take a position and say that these things need to go away fast.
Yeah. And as it happens, I totally agree with you. I'm just making like a sort of lateral point on it. I'm trying to respectfully suggest that it's a really important topic, but we're not going to be able to make any decisions. We're not going to have the power to do anything until we get ourselves organized to build power to do something, if you see what I mean. So in other words, a lot of people get it the wrong way around. They go, let's decide on something, and then we're going to build a movement, right? What we have to do is build a movement, and then we can make a decision on some things, right? I mean, obviously you've got to have some aim, and you've got an aim, you've decided on it, but the aim itself is not the main situation morally. The moral objective here is to build something that can actually practically change the world. That's my orientation. That's why I do the work I do.
I think what is practical is that if these industries are not stopped, which I don't know why it's so hard to say
Eli,
that. Like,
Eli, can we move on? Can we move on, Eli? Because we've been talking about this forever, and I think it's
a very important topic.
Let's move on.
Yeah, it is. Don't worry, it is. So, you know, my short answer to it is I agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Eli. We'll pick it up again another time. For right now, let's go with Lucien. Your hand is next.
Yes, I'm having a little bit of a problem with the whole concept, in that how closely coupled climate and capitalism almost feed on each other. The climate degradation is a direct symptom of capitalism. So you have to bring the whole system down in order to make it work, as far as I can see. I mean, you can consume yourself out of it for a while, but until you stop growing forever, it's still going to collapse. Am I wrong?
I'm not. You can never absolutely predict the future, can you, by definition? But it seems like a reasonable idea. And my opinion, for what it's worth, is obviously capitalism will have to be dismantled in order to move human society on, yes. But it's the same sort of, I'm sure most people have got the idea, right? If you ask me a question about what's right and wrong in the world, I'm probably going to agree with what you say, right? But that's not what you've got me on this call to do. Nothing, we're not going to have any options until we actually build the power to change things. And obviously that's what we need to do. Yeah.
Thanks. So then, Juliana, it's your turn.
Oh, hi. I'm Juliana Elligson, and I own a cloth diaper service in Oregon. And I guess my question is, how can I best serve the movement out here on the West Coast?
Right.
Yeah, so there's no easy answer to that question, in so much as obviously like getting people to Washington, DC is a bit problematic, right? Which isn't to say it couldn't happen. So then the other option is to do something on the West Coast. I don't have a strong opinion about that because both of them are problematic. Obviously doing something on the West Coast is, it's important, potentially as a movement building project, in other words, to get other people involved. But the main show as I see it is to get to Washington, even though it obviously has lots of downsides. I think the general, I'll just give you one or two, general principles here, which is, and I haven't really mentioned this, But the to get to scale, we need a critical mass of people to work full time. And that's partially like a personal decision issue, and it's partially a money issue. But in so much as it's a personal decision issue, that's what I would encourage all of you to do. And obviously, you know, everyone's got their own situation. Some of that is objective, as it were. You know, you just can't do that. But the fact of the matter is lots of people can. And lots of people did that historically in previous political struggles. Obviously, that connects with having enough money to do it, but we've talked about the money situation. So, for instance, in the UK, we've gone from, you know, 10 people all full-time to 130 in 3 months, 3 or 4 months. And a lot of people who've been doing full-time, a lot of activism made that decision because we've got 2 years left. So it's the next 2 years, basically. The other general rule of thumb is to go and do something dramatic that will attract attention, so that you have some credibility when you're talking to people. So, you know, those are some general principles. How it all fixes together in terms of the micro design of what you should and shouldn't do. I think we'll try and work out over the next 4 weeks, if you see what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Roger, I'm going to insert a question here from the chat before we move on to some other folks that have their hands up, because it's come up a couple of times now. Is the Science Rebellion going to be present in this, you know, immediate movement that we're working on together?
Yeah, so I think, you know, building connections with different groups, as we all know, can be tricky. But one of the beauties of coalition building is people only have to agree on 4 things, arguably, which is the time, the place, the time, the demand, and remaining non-violent. So how we've built a coalition in the UK with trade unions and Black community organisations and faith groups is saying, look, we don't have to agree on everything, okay? You know, no one's going to agree on everything. That's, you know, that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is all going to Washington on this date in order to demand that the government declares emergency, and we're going to engage in non-violent action. That's it. If you tick those 4 boxes, you're in. So I don't know precisely the situation with Science Rebellion in America, but obviously they're, you know, in your top 10 list of groups to work with. And certainly in the UK, like a quite close relationship. And I think in Germany, with the A22 project in Germany, there's an idea of 50 scientists from Science Rebellion continuing to be in resistance to the point of being in prison, because if you imprison 50 scientists, dare I say it, that's probably worth 100,000 Americans. I hate to sound reductive about it. So if anyone knows 50 scientists, stick them in front of me and I'll tell them they can change history by just taking a month off. But seriously speaking, you know, we have to be really clear to people of influence in that they have a massive responsibility to do what is necessary at this point in history. And so don't be surprised if they do. I mean, about 3 years ago, you know, even activist scientists wouldn't do anything other than write a letter. And in 3 years, they started throwing paint bombs and things. And so you shouldn't be surprised if hundreds of scientists go to prison in the next 2 years. And because everything's changing. So that's another sort of bright spot on the horizon. But yes, I very much hope that Science Rebellion will be involved. I think Rosie did something, didn't she, at your last iteration. So that's like a sub-project, really, when you get going, is to talk to the, you know, 30,000 scientists in the States and say, come on, 50 of you need to, you know, help save humanity. Tell them to follow the social science, as I always like to remind them. Always winds them up. Anyway, that's that. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Yeah. So John T, you're next. Your question, please, for Roger.
Hey, Roger. Thanks so much for being here. I have two questions. The first is, so after our action on the Beltway, the highway action that we did blocking the road, a lot of groups, NGOs and activist groups suddenly, all of a sudden jumped on the bandwagon of the demand, although they don't support the tactic or declare emergency, at least outwardly. And Biden started talking about possibly declaring one. How much should we be concerned with our ability to claim the victory if all of these other groups are jumping on and saying, oh, we're all demanding this and it happened because of us, staffers, congressional staffers sitting in and stuff like that. And then the second question is it worthwhile to protest the scientists, to do civil disobedience, sort of against the scientists, kind of like how ACT UP did against the scientists in the NIH?
Yeah, so I think, well, I'll tell you a funny story, right? Because everyone has this sanitized idea of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, as you probably know, right? Everyone thinks they're saints nowadays, but of course they weren't, to put it mildly. And Gandhi did this tax strike in India when he first arrived in India. And the British went, we don't care, we're just going to hammer everyone, or whatever the British did in the good old days. And then Gandhi found out that they had stopped charging extortionate taxes to some section of the population. And he immediately declared victory and said, look, we won because, the British have changed their policy. And I think that was a bit off of him, really, because there was no direct relationship between what he did. But obviously, he was just a merciless sort of tactician. And as soon as he saw something he could claim victory on, he claimed victory. So if you want to be a Gandhi person, I suppose as soon as Biden declares victory, you should just be all over the place saying it was us. But, obviously, you can overdo it. So I don't know. Obviously, you should claim victory on it. I don't see any problem on that one. But the main thing is to have your next demand on the go. So you already have that agreed. So you don't have to go down a rabbit hole for 3 months trying to decide what to do next. So, again, that's not really my specialism. But what I would definitely recommend is if he does declare it, then obviously the next thing is to do the things that he can constitutionally do, like 2 or 3 of them or whatever it is, and demand that he actually gets on and does that stuff. As far as going and hassling the scientific community is concerned, this is what I'm saying about keeping your eye on the prize, right? You want to keep everything cognitively simple, particularly because of the culture in America. As soon as you start to diversify, then there's loads more things to disagree on, if you see what I mean. And I know that sounds a little bit potentially whatever over something or other, but it's really important that you're disciplined and decide 2 or 3 mobilization methods, 1 demand, and 1 date when you're going to do action. That's it. That's all you do, right? If some other people come along and say, we want to occupy the science, conference in New Orleans, you're going, fantastic, off you go. But that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is getting 100,000 people, 10,000 people into Washington to sit in the road, on March the 23rd, 2023. That's what we do. And you don't need to be tricky about it, because maybe it's a great idea. So you can just say, great. And what I've said to, Becky and Zach, the reason they're potentially going to come on board is that's their opinion as well, is if you're going to properly scale, you've got to keep it simple. Otherwise, you'll be having nervous breakdowns because it's so complicated. And also because you'll be falling out with each other because Paul doesn't want to go to New Orleans to do, you know what I mean? He wants to go leafleting in North DC. And then you're going to have a big argument about it. And then before you know it, blah, blah, blah. So it's no, that's what we do. Now, if John T wants to take 3 days off to go to New Orleans, that's fine, right? No one's stopping anyone from doing anything. But if you're in this project, that's what you do. And that's the organizational discipline that you need to take stuff to scale. And that's what focusing on the prize means, is if you obviously can get thousands of people to Washington, then it goes without saying that you'll be in the ballpark of making American history. And more importantly, as I keep emphasizing, having a really empowering case study of clear, pragmatic organization for the American movement. And then loads of people want to join you because they think you're cool. Yeah, but those are the thoughts, but I'm not gonna, you know, not gonna have a nervous breakdown if the plan changes, but you have to make a decision, obviously. So hope that helps.
Thank you.
Going to Ellie.